It's really quite simple, like a movie night. You don't think much of it, but it's that ritual and rhythm and routine that really soothes the lower parts of the brain that are so important, that creates like physical and psychological safety for kids.
No, I
So
love
it
that.
doesn't and it doesn't require a lot of money. Just like what are like traditions and routines and keep and we see this with kids with trauma too. The more we have routines and predictability in a child's life, the more the nervous system is soothed. Those
Mhm.
really lower parts of the brain.
Yeah.
So I just know that for my kids during COVID, it was like what rituals, and if you maybe don't have any, so you start creating them, that it's something that we do at the same time every week or the same time every month. And I don't know if you have any ideas there,
Yeah.
but that's
So
just something.
one of my favorite definitions of ritual actually is that ritual is a safe container of belonging. So it's one of those things that you look back at years later and go, this is who my family is. This is what we did when I was growing up. And maybe I'm going to do the same things with my kiddos. So I think when everything feels so fragmented in the outside world, we come back to that safe container and go, this is where my heart can rest. This is where my nervous system can rest. Tam, as you mentioned, that kind of that ritual and rhythm, Dr. Bruce Perry had a graph that came out during COVID where they looked at families who really struggled with stress versus families who thrived. And if you look at everything that the families who were doing well were doing, it was things like predictable routines, predictable rhythms in the household, sitting down for family meals, moving their bodies, being connected in different ways to community, reaching out when they needed help. But it was all these little moments in a day that said, we may not be able to control what's happening in the outside world, but when we have that rhythm and predictability in our own world at home, it gives us a greater sense of control, even when things are crazy outside.
No, absolutely. And I just that's always been my go-to with kids, is creating as much of that space in our home for things that they can rely on every single day when things are so out of sorts, when they're at school or on the weekends or things they hear from friends. But I want to circle back for a second to what I was saying earlier about the mistake my husband and I made about talking about the cost of food in front of our kids. And I am not, especially I have kids who aren't, toddlers, they're not in preschool. I think it is appropriate to talk about, food and that it is expensive, but how we did it probably was, my husband was, it was not well attended to. It could have been executed with a lot more finesse than it was. And these are the things you learn as parents. But I don't think that we should just not tell them about what's going on in the world. I think that providing clear, honest information about the state of the world in developmentally appropriate terms is really, really important, and always drawing on metaphors that kids can understand from their world. It's kind of like, when you're at school, and I don't want to
Mhm.
get to anything political, but we've had to talk about that with our kids because they're hearing information right now. And we're really careful about where maybe, I'd rather that information come from us than it
Yeah.
come from CNN or come from something on, my kids aren't on social media, but if they were, TikTok or Instagram or something, Meta has brought out on the platform, is a lot of misinformation. So how we deliver that should, if some point, be kind of filtered by the parents and however you think is appropriate, but just being careful that not to overwhelm them with it, but be really clear that this is something going on, and no, it's not okay and it doesn't feel good and it feels unsafe. But I want you to know, what this is, but without just dumping it all on them. That's not going to be helpful either. We don't overload them with it. So just giving them small, manageable bites of information, because I think kids know things aren't okay. And we can
Mhm.
say, oh, everything's fine, but like they know it's not fine. They do, they know. And we're telling them then not to trust their inner wisdom and their gut instincts that something's off right now. People are more stressed than normal, and just letting them know you're not wrong. Things, are hard right now. You're right. But let me try to explain to you in the best way I know how what is happening in the world.
Absolutely. And I think something that we're very aware of right now in our own household is, when is the TV on? When is the news on? When is the radio
Mm,
on? I had to stop a conversation in front of my girls the other day, that was occurring about politics, because the information that I want my girls to hear, they're going to hear things at school, but as much as possible, I want to be able to figure out what I want to give them, the message that I want to give them, and then the values that I want to put in that message of who are we, who are the helpers, where is the kindness and the good in the world right now? That's a big one for me and my family. So looking for
Mhm.
those helpers, looking for those kind of those strings that connect us to what's happening in the outside world. As much as possible, I want to be giving that message instead of having the girls overhear the news while they're eating breakfast in the morning.
Yeah, we actually after COVID, we stopped watching the news altogether in the house. Like my husband and I will go out and look for news when we need to, but like we do not have it on the TV for the kids anymore. We've just
Mhm.
decided not to. And that has been really good for our stress as well. Go to my mom's house and I'm like, turn off the news, please. Like we just like we know it's not great right now. Like we're aware. But we don't need that constant influx of information in our
Mhm.
nervous systems while we're trying to eat a meal, right?
Totally. And we also know that kids, when they hear information and they see information on the television, that their stress levels respond on a much higher basis than our levels occur. So I might hear something and go, oh, whereas for them, they're having a very, very different experience in their nervous system when they see something distressing on the news.
Yeah, exactly. I did want to mention a couple really good books that I love to read with kids in therapy that I'm like, I would read. You don't have to read books. Like honestly, I like movies with my kids. They actually get really into it. But stories are great too. And some of it, like the first one, yes, it has to do with trauma. And I know, like, think of the wildfires in California. Like a lot of people listening to this might have been through like a collective trauma. COVID was a collective trauma. But there's a really good book that I always used in therapy called A Terrible Thing Happened by Margaret Holmes. I really love that book. The Rabbit Listened by Corey Doerfeld is another good one for processing emotions when something goes wrong. And When Things Aren't Going Right, Go Left by it's Peter Reynolds and I don't know if it's oh my gosh, Colagavani. We can put that in the description. Those are just a few
Oh, that's beautiful.
books that just let kids know like we don't always know what's going to happen and things don't always go wrong, and yes, terrible things happen, but ultimately, especially The Rabbit Listened and A Terrible Thing Happened really points the attention back to like the safe adults in their life who
Mm,
they can talk to, who they can ask questions from. We can draw pictures, we can, do all kinds of things to kind of get out what needs to get out. But when I think about the terrible thing that happened, I was looking at that book this morning, and it kind of links to what Tanya said earlier about play. When there's a lot of uncertainty in the world and you have a child under the age of 10, one of the best ways they can mitigate the stress that's happening for them is to use child directed play to express the ambiguity and the futility and all of the yucky feelings that come out through imaginative child led play. So you can sit there with them while they're doing it, but no, that's how children work through their fears and their uncertainty, and they develop mastery over situations they don't understand without it having to be us adults teaching something. That's how they really absorb those lessons, and it's done through the imagination, and it's mother nature's remedy to anxiety. So
beautiful.
like the kids are going to do this, you're going to see this as a parent, there's things to look for. They'll do things like organizing play, they'll line things up, they'll put them in categories. You might see elements of good or bad where there's a good guy and then there's a bad guy. It's quite common when kids with anxiety to show death themes in their play. Sometimes it's very aggressive play that we're just like they're playing and killing things or decapitating things. Hiding things is another one we'll see with kids in their play. These are all normal expressions of a child who is just trying to work through what's happening. And we don't need to tell them it's not appropriate. We don't need to lecture them. We don't need to say, oh, it's kind of like this. Like, we're not going to do any of that. Just allow that sacred space of the play for that child to express their fears and impulses and uncertainty about the world. And you'll know it's something because they'll do it over and over again. That's
Mhm.
telling you it's something, not just
Mhm.
once. Or nurturing play when they're feeding the baby or feeding their pets. Like we'll see a lot of that too when kids are feeling a little fragile. um, just want to let parents know that's something I would say my kids are actually doing quite a bit of it right now, and I think it's
Yeah.
quite interesting. There's a lot of good bad play happening in my house right now, which is interesting. I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah, Tim, and I think, I think often parents go like, oh, what am I supposed to do in this play? I think the biggest thing is don't direct the play. They're just working through right now. They might be playing by themselves. They might have you with them. You just want to kind of have kind of a mutual gaze on the play and just let them play it out. Let them lead. As adults, we often end up leading that play, but the children are working through what's happening for them. So it's such a beautiful reminder just to let them direct the play, let them do what they need to do, and that's how they're processing those difficult thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll just leave you with this, everyone. We'll wrap this up. It's just, stick to this, formula if you can. Validate it. Talk about times you have felt this way. Give them clear, honest information, and then create that rhythm and predictability in your home as much as you can, and including, a space for kids to, in developmentally healthy ways such as play, express their feelings. We can again go to books, we can go to movies. Those are other ways we can, kind of teach those lessons. But at the end of the day, what's most important is your child has that secure base at home with you, and they know that no matter what happens in the world, that relationship with you and, siblings or grandparents isn't going anywhere right now.
I think the only thing I would add to that is one of the things that doesn't change is nature and getting outside. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a beautiful way for kids to work through feelings, to really settle those nervous systems of theirs. So as much as possible, get outside with them, let them get outside, encourage them that nature is one of the world's most beautiful healers. That's where I go with my kiddos constantly is get outside, get outside, get outside.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.